What's up YouTube? Here I'm going to be discussing the best units to beat Maddening difficulty with. Now, I recently beat the game with about 70 to 80 hours clocked, but that was completing all of the paralogs and the DLC content and everything. If you are attempting to beat the Maddening difficulty without doing the paralogs or the DLC, I'm assuming it might take about 50 hours. Now, that being said, first up we have Alear. Now, I sort of want to put Alear in S tier, but unfortunately, there are some units that just reign a lot stronger than them. For example, I believe that Alear is a bit weaker in the early game, but picks off really strong, so that's the reason I'm putting Alear in A tier, not S tier. And next we have Alcryst. Personally, I think he's one of the weakest archers in the game. I have seen some people have some success with him, but for my run, I'm personally going to go for D because I just believe that there's better archers. As for Alfred, I kept him a little bit longer than I should have. He was a promoted unit at the time I dropped him, and all of his stats were like around 15. Meanwhile, some other units, such as my taker units, are around like 25 defense. Some of my units had about like strength in the 20s, and he was just around 15 all across the board. He's just not really a good unit. Now we have Amber. Good growth rates. Personally, I didn't use him too much, but he is a good option if you do lose a unit in Classic. As for Anna, I also heard that she's a good unit, but personally, when you get her in around, I think, Chapter 6, most of your units are around level 6, 7, 8, which means the enemies are about level 10. You receive her at level 5, which means she's a bit difficult to train up, but if you're willing to put in the effort, she could be good. That's why I'm going to put her in C tier. Next, we have Boucheron. He basically has the Albert effect. There's a lot of units that just do what he does better, so I'm going to put him in F tier. I see no real reason to use him when there's other tank units that just do the job better. Now we have Bunet. He is a really solid unit. He is one of the better tanks in the game. I'm debating whether to put him at B or C. I think I'm going to put him at C mainly because I didn't use him because there were other units that were better, but completely viable. As for Celine, again, sort of the Alfred treatment. I tried really hard to use her because she was a cool design early in the game, but she fell off really hard. Couldn't double anything, low magic stat on top of that, and she can't really take a hit at all with her low HP and low defenses. As for Chloe, she isn't a terrible unit, but she requires a lot of investment to be good, so I'm going to put her in D tier. As for Citrinne, she's a really solid unit. I'm going to put her at C tier. She doesn't really excel at anything crazy, but she's not bad as compared to Celine. Now we have Clanne. Honestly, just F tier. I'm pretty sure his strength is a higher growth stat than his magic attack, even though he's a mage, so I feel like that's enough said. As for Diamant, really solid unit. Good bulk, decent speed. He's not going to double too often, but he's able to take a couple hits and good frontline early until you get solid tank. As for Etie, this might be a little bit controversial. I'm putting her in S tier, mainly because without her, I don't think I would have beaten this Maddening run. She was monumental in completing the DLC, where there was at least 30 dragons, and at a certain point, the reinforcements spawn, I believe every 2 turns, along with 2 dragons, so I ended up killing maybe 30, 40 dragons, and she leveled up about 6 times and just was an absolute beast. Fogado is probably the next best archer in the game, probably the best archer in the game, or should I say bow user. I put him in B tier. As for Framme, she doesn't really offer anything offensive, but in the early game, she single-handedly won me a couple chapters with her chain guard. Good healer, low movement, there's better units, but I'm going to put her in C tier just for her viability in the early game. As for Goldmary, easily the best unit in the game. I immediately saw her and I was like, she needs to be a great knight. She has really high defense, really high strength, solid speed, so she basically turned into like a 40 defense great knight with like 20 something speed, so she wasn't getting doubled. And I believe if you have the DLC, I put Tiki's Emblem on her, and her defense is even higher. She even has higher HP if you put Corin's plus 10 HP skill on her, so she's just an absolute tank. She can literally go into 20 enemies and not die, unless there's a mage, and she does take a little bit of damage, but if you put some resistance into her, then she will be fine. As for Hortensia, this is another really strong unit. I'm going to put her in S tier, and I'm doing this because she has when she has a good stat, she has a really good stat. Her resistance is about 40 by the end of the game. Her defense isn't that bad. She can maybe live a hit, but her HP and defense is really frail. But the reason that she's good is that she's a staff user, and she's on the Pegasus Knight. She has really high mobility. She can double most units, which means that even though she has a low magic, she can still do a lot of damage. Now I'm going to put Ivy in S tier for basically the same reason. Ivy is a lot tankier in terms of HP and defense. Say roughly 20 resistance compared to Hortensia's 40. But the downside for Ivy is that she really can't double, but that's completely fine because her magic stat is incredibly high. Like, for example, if you're going to attack a unit with Ivy, she's probably doing the same amount of damage as Hortensia is doing in 1 hit than Hortensia is doing in 2 hits. As for Jade, good early tank. Personally, I think she's really strong. Unfortunately, I didn't use her because I did have better tanks. Jean, he has a cool ability, but unfortunately, unless you reclass him, I don't think he's going to see much viability. C or D, I think just because of his ability, he's going to go into C tier. But he's rough to use if you keep him in his current class. As for Kagetsu, definitely A tier. He was actually my tank in the early game if you pair him with Ike. He's able to just go in there. He has a solid like 25 defense base, I believe. And you just set him in with a bunch of units. He's already stronger than most of the units on the level. You pop Ike's Aether, and then he basically just tanks every hit. And he's still gaining a lot of experience despite being a promoted unit. So he will be leveling up and become even stronger and stronger. As for Lapis, this unit I tried using over Diamant for a short while, but I found that she just wasn't good. I put her in C tier because she is viable, but unfortunately Diamant is just a lot bulkier. Lapis, I believe, does beat him out in speed, but I think that's it. And on top of that, it was only probably like 1 or 2 points. I'm sure that Diamant will level the scoring if they were like similar levels in like promoted classes. Now I believe this is Lindon. Late in the game, not bad, but there's just, you already have your army at that point. Luis, good early game, really good tank actually. If you want to give experience to Luis instead of Vander, that's extremely beneficial as he can carry you into the early game to the mid game. But as the late game comes around, in my personal opinion, I heard the generals are good, but I just don't think they're good with their low movement and weakness to magic. I think Goldmary is just better, being a walking general basically as a great knight. As for Merrin, I did use her later in the game, but unfortunately, when you get her in like the late mid game, there are a lot of armored units, and she is a dagger user and sword user. You could use an armor slayer on her, and she could get some viability, but she has low defenses, high speed, but not high enough speed to double some of the faster units. She's solid C tier. Now for Pandreo, I just think there's better options. Like if you're already using Framme, use Framme, or even Jean. But unless you reclass him, which to like a stage maybe, he's not that good. Panette, personally, S tier. She was insane, especially if you put a killer axe on her and then you upgrade the killer axe at the blacksmith, even +1 or +2. I'm pretty sure you want to do +1 or +2. You have to check because 3 and 4 don't actually increase the crit rate, which is really all you care about. So you upgrade a killer axe to 1 or 2, get that extra crit rate, and every time she was attacking, her crit rate was around 63, and her dexterity stat actually maxed out at 23 for me, which isn't terrible, which means that even though she's an axe user, she was hitting a lot of hits. So for example, she'd be doing, with her like insanely high strength and HP stat as a berserker, she probably had like 40 strength, 60, 70 HP, but she was landing hits at like 90%, and then her crit was around the 60, 63. So extremely strong unit. She can one-shot any boss. You can like triple dance her if you can, or you're able to dance her twice and have her attack 3 times and just kill most bosses. Rosado, unfortunately, is a decent unit. I thought they were going to be a lot stronger in the late game, considering that basically every promoted unit that you get is pretty strong. But unfortunately, Rosado has like a low strength stat, low speed, low dexterity. He's mainly there for cleanup crew basically. But the best part about him is that the utility with the Wyvern Knight that they ride, so you can easily get around the map and clean up kills. Saphir, if you have Panette, I see no real reason to use her. She's not terrible, but I'll put her in D tier. Seadall, I think it'd be a crime to not put him in S tier. He's a dancer. Every dancer in every game is basically S tier. You can have a unit move twice, even 3 times with, I believe, Veyle's dance. So basically, you can use Panette to attack a boss, dance with Seadall, and then you can use the Byleth on a different unit to actually have one of those units. Or actually, you could do some cheese with, I believe it's Kagetsu's reposition. So you can reposition Seadall from behind. Maybe, I'm not sure. I'm not sure it actually land on the same slot. But you can get a lot of things off with Seadall. Timera, really solid unit, along with her brother. High speed stat, high strength stat. I don't believe she had the best defenses, but she's a really hard hitter. Basically a Panette, but with a lance. Now we have Vander. Unfortunately, he falls off hard. One of the worst growth stats in the game. He's decent in the early game, but you really don't want to be giving him XP because for like every kill he gets like maybe like 1 to 4. And next we have Yunaka. She was a beast in the early game, so I'm gonna put her in actually high B tier. I would put her in A tier, but she's just not on the same level as these units, unfortunately. If you give her an Iron Dagger +4, that actually carries you all the way up into the late game. And I say that because there are so many armored units in the late game that the Iron Dagger doesn't really even do any damage, or any dagger does any damage in the late game. But her high speed stat and semi-decent strength stat, paired with the Iron Dagger +4, allows her to kill most unarmored units in the early to mid game. So she's actually a mid game carry, in my opinion. Now we have Zelkov. Sorry, this is out of order. Personally, if you have Yunaka, I see no real reason to use Zelkov. I'm not going to put him in F tier because he's a decent unit, but I'll put him in high D tier, potentially even C tier. Next we have Mauvier and Veyle. I mean, it should go without being said that they're really strong units, considering you get them at like the very end of the game. I'm just going to put them in possibly either A or B, depending on your army. If you need them to fill a slot or a role in your team, put them in A tier. If not, they're probably in B tier. Now, I hope you guys all enjoyed this video, and it gives you some insight on how to beat the game on Maddening difficulty, what units to use, so you don't have to make the same mistakes I did, or you can go ahead and try testing out Alfred, Boucheron, Celine, or even Clanne, and then seeing if they had better success for you. That being said, don't forget to like and subscribe, and be sure to check in for our next Fire Emblem Engage YouTube video.